Chapter 2, verse 172 and 173 of the Holy Quran says, O you who believe, eat of the good things that we have provided you with, and give thanks to Allah if He it is whom you serve. He has forbidden you only what dies of itself, and blood, and the flesh of swine, and that over which any other name than that of Allah has been invoked. Then whoever is driven by necessity, not desiring nor exceeding the limit, no sin is upon him. Chapter 6, verse 118 and 119. Eat then of that on which Allah's name has been mentioned, if you are believers in His message. And what reason have you that you should not eat of that on which Allah's name is mentioned, when He has already made plain to you what He has forbidden to you, excepting that which you are compelled to? And part of verse 122 of chapter 6, and eat not of that on which Allah's name has not been mentioned, and that is surely a transgression. As Muslims, we are given explicit instructions on what we can and cannot eat, as well as taught that there can be exceptions to those rules. We are even given instructions on how to treat any animal which will be used to sustain us, and how to slaughter those animals in the most humane of ways. On the 28th of March this year, I gave a speech which centered around animal welfare and how Islam instructs us to look after animals and how we must treat animals with respect and dignity throughout their lives. That speech was in response to the Danish government banning halal and kosher slaughtered meat. Since then, as we are all probably aware, a sort of halal meat scandal has exploded in the UK national media. It seems that there is a clear and coordinated attack on Muslims from the media in the UK, who seem to see anti-Islamic reporting as some sort of cash cow. I was going to call this speech the halal meat scandal, but the reality is that this so-called new scandal is something which affects both Jews and Muslims. But yet, when we read any newspaper or watch the news or go online, the attacks and claims of barbaric butchery are mostly pointed towards Muslims, with a small byline of "Oh Jews too." On the 7th May, the Sun newspaper's front page headline screamed, "Halal secret of Pizza Express." The key word in this headline is secret. They want to make it seem like this was hidden away from the general public, that without some sort of journalistic investigation, that this information would not have been made public. But was this a big secret? I've personally known that Pizza Express use halal chicken for over a year. The information is readily available on their website. And if you ask in the restaurants, their staff will tell you that the chicken is halal. It was listed as halal in last year's popular Halal Food Festival, which was held at the London Excel Centre. The Guardian in September 2013 reported the following when it produced an article on that Halal Food Festival. The big fast food chains are certainly onto it, spurred on by halal-only rivals such as Chicken Cottage and Perfect Fried Chicken. More than 100 KFC outlets around the country are currently running open-ended trials with finger-licking halal. Pizza Express uses halal-approved chicken as do about 1/5 of Nando's 270-odd restaurants in Britain. The Independent, when reporting on the same show, wrote in September 2013, restaurant chains that are changing their menus include Pizza Express, which uses only halal chicken. 1 in 5 branches of Nando's serves halal certified chicken, and KFC is running a halal trial in about 100 of its outlets. The meat and wine company Steakhouse in Westfield, Shepherd's Bush, even has a separate halal menu. This was such a secret that the national press have been reporting it repeatedly. So I would say well done to the Sun newspaper for their hard-hitting, investigative journalism on this. For those that are unaware, all the chicken used in Domino's is also halal, except for their chicken wings. And that information is also available on their website. The top line on that day's Sun said, "After Subway ban bacon." And again, the headline writers have done a fantastic job at making sure that they're going to stir up anger. Subway bans bacon. For a country which has so staunchly held on to the traditional English breakfast, of course that headline will anger people. Another case of them coming over here and changing our way of life, they scream. But what actually happened? Well, for a start, Subway have not banned anything. What some Subway stores decided was to stop selling slow-selling items on their menu for profitability reasons. There are some Subway stores which, due to their location, sell a lot of halal sandwiches and little to no pork-based ones. So they simply decided to stop selling them. No ban, no bending to Muslim demands, just simple economics. Subway adjusts menu after analysis of local area trends and sales. Doesn't make a catchy headline though. In fact, as I was driving to the mosque this morning, I heard a new Subway radio advert in which they talked about their new breakfast sandwich. And I had a look a little earlier to see how it was described on their website. And the website says as follows: the mega melt, sizzling beechwood smoked bacon, pork sausage, free-range egg omelette, and melted cheese. It's strange that Subway would spend a significant amount of money advertising this sandwich if, as the Sun says, they have banned bacon. The BBC then followed the lead of the Sun, reporting that UK supermarkets are selling meat which is halal, but not labelled as such. And the Daily Mail ran the same story on the 8th of May. But the first time I heard that story about the supermarkets was back in 2010, 4 years ago. And since then, the same story has been recycled by the mainstream media a number of times. The British government issued a consultation document way back in 2005 saying that it would like to implement a system of labelling on a voluntary basis when it comes to halal and kosher meat. That's how old this story is. The Sun and the Daily Mail are arguing that the meat should be labelled accordingly so customers have the choice. But this choice only seems to extend to whether the meat is halal or not. They don't seem to be arguing for labelling to show how the animal was killed. Was this animal electrocuted or gassed before it was shipped to the supermarket? Did the animal have any broken bones before it was killed? Or what about a picture of the conditions these animals are kept in on the packaging? Or how about a list of the drugs injected in the animals to keep them alive for long enough to be slaughtered in the worst conditions known to man? Apparently, the method of slaughter doesn't matter as long as it's not halal. And people seemingly don't care at all, in fact, whether the meat is kosher. According to the RSPCA, less than 50% of some animals slaughtered in the Jewish method are sold as kosher in the UK. Less than 50% of the meat from the animal. And that's because there are certain parts of even kosher killed animals which Jews cannot eat. Now the rest of that meat, it's not thrown away, it's not destroyed, it is sold as normal meat. No labelling about the religious nature of the slaughter. It's simply packaged and sold. And with kosher meat, 0%, none of the animals are stunned before slaughter. But where are the kosher meat scandal headlines? None of the kosher meat sold in the UK is pre-stunned. Let's compare the stats between kosher meat and halal meat with respect to pre-stunning. An RSPCA report from February last year via the Food Standards Agency showed that 97% of halal cattle are pre-stunned, 90% of halal sheep and goats are pre-stunned, and 96% of halal poultry are pre-stunned. 97%, 96%, and 90%. And what percentage of kosher meat is pre-stunned in the UK? As I said, 0. But there is hardly a peep from the mainstream media about the kosher meat. Maybe that is because a recent survey by the Anti-Defamation League in America found that the UK has just 8% of people who hold anti-Semitic views, one of the lowest in the world. I guess the newspapers would not have sold as many copies if they went with a kosher meat scandal compared to a halal meat scandal. After being accused of Islamophobia, the mainstream media swiftly moved their argument on to say that this is all about labelling. This is all about labelling the products and not leaving customers in the dark about what they're actually buying. I partially already addressed this earlier, but I completely agree with them. The meat should be properly labelled. People should know whether the beef they're eating is actually beef or is it horse meat. But beyond the fact that that scandal was quickly forgotten, let's look at what the Daily Mail actually said. MPs could use the debate on new consumer legislation next week to force a change in the law. That actually recently failed. After it emerged, more than 70% of all New Zealand lamb in supermarkets is from halal abattoirs, a fact that is not stated on the labelling. Tesco's, Sainsbury's, Morrison's, Waitrose and Marks & Spencer's all confirm they sell that imported meat. The switch to slaughtering animals in line with Islamic ritual saves money because the end product can be eaten by Muslims and non-Muslims alike. The switch was made so that Muslims and non-Muslims can eat the same meat, is the claim. Now, this may be true, but is the New Zealand meat in question actually halal? Beef and Lamb New Zealand are an organisation that promote New Zealand beef and lamb, as their name suggests. And they're funded jointly by farmers, New Zealand retailers and New Zealand processors. And here's what they say about the New Zealand lamb. Although a significant proportion of sheep and beef is slaughtered according to halal requirements, only a much smaller percentage is actually halal certified and labelled. Halal audit, certification and labelling incur extra costs, so it is only done at the request of a customer or when it is a market access requirement overseas. The beef and lamb may be from animals that have been slaughtered in accordance with halal requirements, but that product is subsequently contaminated by the addition of non-halal ingredients or proximity to non-halal goods such as pork. It therefore becomes redesignated as non-halal and cannot be labelled as halal in the supermarkets. So, if the UK supermarkets have not explicitly ordered halal-only meat, then the meat is not halal, as there is no traceability of it being treated as halal throughout the supply chain. If the UK supermarkets did explicitly ask for halal meat, then it is labelled and proper segregation of the meat is put in place. And it is controlled by the fact that there is a halal label on the package. So UK customers are not being stealthily sold halal meat via the back door in some sort of attempted creeping Sharia takeover, as I've heard in the media. The newspapers and other media treat this issue as black and white, halal or not. But it is simply not as easy as that. If it was that simple, there would not be 6 or 7 different bodies who can issue a halal certification. Only one would be needed. And as I've shown, even meat slaughtered whilst being blessed cannot be halal in certain circumstances. Labelling has been an issue for many years. As I work in the food and beverage industry, I see outright manipulation of the laws all the time. Drinks labelled as sugar-free when all they do is use a sugar substitute, which at the time simply has not been designated as a sugar variant. Food and drink labelling, food and drink labelled as all natural when they have high fructose corn syrup in them. For years, salt and sugar and fats were not on labels, and even when they are, the numbers were improperly broken down and applied to make them look lower. Even now, you can send meals to labs and when tested find that the calorific values on the packaging is wrong, often lower than the real values. Meanwhile, a recent which.co.uk investigation on food fraud found that 40% of lamb takeaways had been contaminated with other meats, with some containing no lamb at all. And the meat from 5 of the restaurants could not even be identified. This news hardly piqued anyone's interest. No continuous daily rolling newspaper headlines, and I doubt that it will stop thousands of drunk British teenagers from indulging in a kebab after a Friday or Saturday night out. Which have a petition on their website, which you can sign, and so far, in respect of this food fraud, and so far, it has just over 32,000 signatures. Meanwhile, the petition to stop the August bank holiday being changed to Margaret Thatcher Day has more than 52,000 signatures. It seems that people don't care about their meat as long as it's not the Muslim meat. Labelling needs tighter regulation all around. And it's not just an issue of whether the meat is halal or not. There is, as I said, an Islamophobic agenda in the media in general. From reporting on the niqab, to so-called Muslim grooming gangs, to Sharia courts and Islamic banking, to halal slaughter. The promised Messiah, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, said that jihad is with the pen and not with the sword. And this, what we see in the mainstream media every single day about Muslims, is the jihad that modern Muslims are fighting. We are fighting with the pen, using mediums like blogs, Twitter, Facebook and YouTube to fight back against the mass media and their anti-anything Islamic stance. So I would say to everybody that this isn't a time for division within Muslims. This is a time for us to stand together and fight the racism and and the anti-Islamophobic agenda that we're seeing on TV and in the newspapers.